You should be all set. Are you two gonna be okay if I leave now? Jerry asked, already heading for the door. Yeah, it sounds simple enough. Run through our routines and follow the instructions. Piece of cake. Zach replied, smirking and folding his arms across his chest. Yeah, we'll be fine. Thanks for showing us the ropes, I said, offering a wave as Jerry walked out the door. He paused, turning to face us for a moment. He had a grave expression written across his withered face. This goes without saying, but make sure you follow the rules to the letter. I've seen too many young, bright-eyed kids like yourselves come back here under different circumstances. And the way that he said that sent a shiver down my spine. There was a cold finality in his words with a hint of sorrow splashed in. He had seen some things. Before either of us could respond, the door slammed shut and we were left completely alone. What was that all about? Is he saying that we'll die if we don't follow those dumb rules? Old man's full of shit. Zach huffed, shaking his head. I pursed my lips. Maybe he just wants us to be cautious. I mean, they're probably common sense safety measures, but I bet Jerry's witnessed his fair share of accidents over the years. I'm sure he's trying to watch out for us. Yeah, you've got a point. He didn't have to be so dramatic about it, though. Zach replied, his arms still crossed. Hey, I don't mind a little drama every once in a while. It shows character. And by the way, have you read these yet? I asked, picking up a sheet that had the word Monday imprinted on the top in a large, bold font. Nah, hit me with them. What's the damage? I hurriedly scanned the page, involuntarily furrowing my brows the more that I soaked in. The further I got, the more confused I became. A sense of unease crept over me as I began to read aloud. Rule number 1. Start your patrol 15 minutes after 10 o'clock. A little girl will approach you while performing this task. Do not speak to her. Rule number 2. A demon will present itself to you at some point during your shift. Place a holy talisman around your neck and it will not be able to cause you harm. Failure to do so may result in possession and/or death. Rule number 3. Ensure that you're locked inside the guard shack with the door securely locked by exactly 2:37 a.m. Do not step outside for any reason until 2:42 a.m. Restless spirits tend to get grumpy at the beginning of the week. Below the list of instructions was a hastily scrawled addition. Rule number 4. Bring a copy of these directions with you and stay together at all times. I locked eyes with Zach as I finished reading the rules to him. His expression matched mine before a smirk inched across his lips. He began laughing, tears welling in his eyes as I stood and stared blankly at him. What a load of bullshit. Do they seriously expect us to believe any of this crap? A demon presenting itself to us. I mean, come on. I've heard of Ricky hazing, but this is a bit much, don't you think? Well, yeah, it does seem a bit wacky, I said, pulling out a drawer. But on the astronomically slim chance that this isn't a prank, I would rather be safe than sorry. I produced a large Ziploc bag from the drawer and held it up for Zach to see. Somebody had slapped a piece of tape on the front and written "Talismans" in black Sharpie across it. Zach scoffed as I plucked out a tarnished gold amulet inscribed with some sort of ancient writing. Really, you're buying into this? Sorta, I mean, what are you afraid of? Being a little too fashionable. I retorted, displaying my fresh new bling. Zach couldn't help but grin. Fine, whatever, give me one of those. He relented, fishing in the bag before producing his own talisman. Zach's was shaped like a cross with faded green emeralds encased within. See, now was that so hard? If you're done being a drama queen, let's get this show on the road, I said, pointing at the clock on the wall. 10:15 on the nose. Zach mumbled incoherently to himself before reluctantly trudging to the door. I snagged the list of rules before following him outside. The cemetery was eerily silent. It was summertime, so I would have expected to hear some sort of insects or frogs or owls. Something. But the only noise that I picked up was that of our footsteps, my own breathing, and the occasional light howl of the breeze as it swept through the grass. If I wasn't in a graveyard in the middle of the night, I probably would have found it peaceful. "Hey Nate," Zach asked, shattering the silence. "What's up?" I replied, shining my flashlight between tombstones. "Did you ever think that maybe this job might be a little, I don't know, too easy? We'll be getting paid quite a bit, and it doesn't seem like we have to do that much. Protecting a giant yard full of dead people can't be that demanding, right?" I bit my lower lip, and now that he had mentioned it, something did seem strange about the position. The salary-to-work ratio wasn't adding up. I don't know, maybe this rules thing is legit. That, or they could have a high turnover rate. Think about it, not many people want overnight shifts, and plenty of folks wouldn't set foot in a cemetery after dark if their lives depended on it. And that seemed to ease his tension a bit. You're probably right. People get spooked easily, and that has to be it. What has to be it? Zach and I stopped dead in our tracks. We slowly turned to each other, our faces pale as sheets. The voice of a young girl had drifted from directly behind us. I gulped. Zach's teeth began to chatter. Neither of us had the slightest idea what to do. "Hello? Why aren't you saying anything?" I mustered up all the courage I had and turned toward our unwelcome guest. A little girl with blonde pigtails skipped closer to us. She was concealing something behind her back, a wide grin plastered across her lips. She couldn't have been older than 5 or 6 years old. "My name's Annika. What's yours?" Again, she received no response. "None of you worker people are any fun. You never want to play with me," she huffed, her smile melting into a deep frown. I'd be lying if I said that I didn't think about replying to her. Maybe Annika was just a lonely spirit who wanted some company. But I quickly snapped myself back to reality. No, we had been warned about her for a reason. "You're not even gonna talk to me," Annika pouted, tears welling in her deep blue eyes. I weakly shook my head. Nothing in the instructions told me that I couldn't at least do that. I instantly knew that I had made the right decision. The little girl's eyes flooded with darkness until they were pitch black. She began to cackle, her demented laughs ringing out into the desolate night atmosphere. She exposed her hands, revealing what she had been hiding. I choked down a scream. Annika was holding a bloody, dripping hatchet. "You chose wisely," she bellowed, before turning back in the direction she came. Zach and I watched as she skipped further and further away before seemingly disappearing into thin air. Once the little girl was completely out of sight, we shared a glance. "What the hell was that?" Zach muttered. "That," I replied, pulling up the list of rules, "is proof that we aren't being hazed. Now we know that this isn't some kind of twisted joke." Zach mulled it over for a moment. I could see the cogs turning in his head. "Honestly, I still don't buy it," he concluded, continuing onward. I stared blankly at him, jaw agape. "What in the ever-loving crap do you mean you don't buy it? We just saw it with our own eyes." "I mean exactly what I said, I don't buy it. It's gotta be Jerry or one of the other watchmen testing us. Maybe one of them has a granddaughter who agreed to help out, I don't know. But it's going to take a lot more than a creepy little girl to convince me that any of this," he spat, snatching the talisman from his neck, "isn't just some elaborate hoax." I shook my head, breaking eye contact. What was I supposed to say to that? We had just seen a little girl with a bloody hatchet evaporate into the wind, and Zach still didn't believe it. I was dumbstruck. After weighing my options, I decided to catch up to my companion and continue our patrol in silence. I knew that nothing I could say would convince Zach that what we had just experienced was real. There was no point in trying. Eventually, we reached a gate at the far end of the graveyard. As my light illuminated it, I realized how poorly maintained it was. Its black paint was chipping, leaving multiple spots exposed to rust. But the most interesting part, it was hanging wide open. "Zach, do you know if this is supposed to be shut?" I asked, searching his expression. He pondered it for a moment. "I would think so. Maybe Jerry left out this way and forgot to close it." I slowly nodded my head. That didn't make much sense, seeing as the rear entrance led to a wide open field, but it was better than the alternative. "Yeah, that has to be it. Nobody would even need to use this. I'll go close it." I marched up to the gate and grabbed onto the cool metal bars. A small creak emitted from the rusted hinges as I pulled. I had it about halfway shut when I paused. My heart suddenly began to race and my blood ran cold, because standing right outside of the cemetery's boundary was a man. Hi there, I'm just gonna close this," I said, continuing what I had started. The mysterious figure turned toward me and stepped into the light, allowing me a better look at his face. He looked relatively young, late 20s or early 30s if I had to take a stab at it. His clothes were far outdated. He sported a beige coat and a fedora, which was a strange combination given that it was mid-June. A lit cigarette dangled from his lips and the smoke billowing high into the warm night air. I instantly got a sinking feeling in my gut. This felt wrong. "No, don't bother, I'll take care of it," the man said, sauntering into the confines of the graveyard. To my utter shock, he snapped his fingers and the gate began to shut of its own volition. I thought back to rule number 2. This must have been the demon. "Hey, who the hell are you?" Zach interjected, staring daggers at our untimely visitor. The man took a drag of his cigarette, exhaled slowly, and then flashed Zach the creepiest smile that I had ever seen. And after our encounter with Annika, that was really saying something. "My name is Amodius." A chill involuntarily rippled down my spine. Amodius, it sounded strangely familiar, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. "Well, Amodius, I need you to get the heck out of here before I call the cops. This is private property," Zach replied, flashing him directly in the eyes with his torch. "I'm afraid that I won't be leaving anytime soon. In the meantime, I think I'll stick with you," the entity bellowed, marching in Zach's direction. A flashlight beam directly to the eyes was doing absolutely nothing to halt his progress. Zach's expression dropped and I watched all the color drain from his face. My stomach twisted itself into knots. We had been warned. "Zach, the talisman!" I shouted, motioning to the ward around my neck. He frantically felt around in his pockets. I looked down with bated breath as Amodius closed the distance. Zach was getting more panicked by the second. "Ha, I got it," he finally yelled, triumphantly holding up the cross necklace. His victory was short-lived. "Sorry," Amodius said, placing a hand on Zach's shoulder. "But you're too late." My heart pounded like a jackhammer in my chest. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Before Zach had a chance to throw the talisman around his neck, Amodius's form had begun to dissipate and flow directly into Zach. A black cloud flooded into his mouth and in an instant it was gone. I swear in that moment that I saw Zach's eyes flash red before returning to their normal hue. Zach?" I said, unsure of what to do. "Nate, what the hell just happened to me?" I breathed a sigh of relief. It appeared that whatever that mysterious cloud was, it hadn't affected him too badly. "I think we just met the demon, and I think you were just possessed." "Well, what are we supposed to do? I can't be possessed. I've got too much to live for. Come on, Nate, I'm freaking out here," Zach said, pacing back and forth. Okay, try to stay calm. Nothing weird has happened to you yet, so let's go back to the guard shack and come up with a game plan. Does that sound good?" Yeah, you're right. I don't feel any different. Maybe it was all another elaborate joke. I pursed my lips. I highly doubt that, but after what we've seen tonight, I can't rule it out. The walk back to the guard post was a solemn one. Zach seemed like he was deep in thought, and I couldn't blame him. We had a lot to think about. Once we had returned, I locked the pair of us inside. "What are you doing that for? Trying to keep me quarantined?" Zach asked, raising an eyebrow. "Not just you, but I'm keeping both of us quarantined. Remember rule number 3. Well, it's 2:35, but we spent a lot of time out there." Okay, enough with these stupid rules. We ran into a creepy kid and some oddball smoker. So what? That doesn't mean that they're real. "Alright, you're free to take that chance. Either way, I'm calling Jerry," I said, producing my phone from my pocket. I turned my back on him and dialing Jerry's number. He didn't pick up. When I whipped back around to update Zach, I nearly leapt out of my skin. He was standing almost nose to nose with me. A wide grin stamped across his face, and the entirety of his eyes were pitch black. Zach, what the hell are you doing?" I said, backing up as far as I could. My butt hit the desk, sending a stack of papers fluttering to the ground. "Zach isn't here right now," the entity uttered in a deep and gravelly voice. I could feel myself beginning to quiver. "Fine, Amodius, what do you plan on doing with them?" Amodius began to cackle, completely disregarding my question. At that moment, I started to hear violent knocks on the door and the windows. I could see what appeared to be invisible handprints slapping the glass. I started to hyperventilate. This was all too much. Tears welled in the corners of my eyes as I darted to the other side of the shack. I didn't have a lot of room to work with, but I knew that I needed to put as much space between myself and the demon as humanly possible. Zach's face turned toward me, the low laughter finally dying down. "What am I going to do with this arrogant mortal, you ask?" Amodius said, glaring at me but remaining motionless. "I'm going to take his soul to the underworld, of course." He began to cackle once more, his boisterous laughter mingling with the howls and rattling outside my little prison. I crumpled to the ground, curling into a ball and covering my head with my hands. 5 minutes. That's all that I had to wait, right? I didn't know if I could even make it that long before losing my sanity. Just as the noises around me reached a crescendo, everything suddenly fell dead silent. No whistling winds, no hands against glass, and more disturbingly, no cackling demon. I hesitantly lifted my head, fully expecting to find Zach looming over me, holding some sort of makeshift weapon, but he wasn't. Instead, I saw him go limp, his body toppling onto the desk behind him. I hurriedly rushed to his side, praying that he was okay. Zach, I shouted, shaking his shoulder. A muffled groan escaped his lips. I exhaled sharply. It felt as if a weight had been lifted. Zach picked himself up off the desk, groggily locking eyes with me. "What just happened?" I crossed my arms. "You got possessed and started laughing, and then you passed out. You remember any of that?" "Not a thing." "Well, at least now you have your proof that this isn't a hoax." Zach opened his mouth to speak, but the buzzing of my cell phone cut him off. It was Jerry. I put a finger to my lips and accepted the call. "What do you want, kid? This better be good. Old men need their rest, you know." Yeah, I don't know if good is the word that I would use." I could hear Jerry sigh over the line. "Let me guess, one of you knuckleheads broke rule number 2 and forgot your talisman. If you hadn't, you wouldn't be calling me, and if you had broken the other ones, you wouldn't be able to call me. Do I have that right?" I shamefully stared at the ground. Yes, we ran into the demon named Amodius, and Zach wasn't wearing his necklace. I could practically see Jerry shaking his head. "Alright, I'll be up there soon. Don't let Zachary leave until we can assess the damage. Are either of you hurt?" "Not physically, no." "Okay." That was Jerry's last parting word before hanging up. I didn't blame him for being so short with me. He probably saw us as children, left alone for a few short hours until we had already managed to mess up. What did he say? Zach asked, sheepishly meeting my gaze. He said he's on the way and that he's gonna kick your ass for waking him up when he gets here. That guy's got a lot of nerve. My body gets commandeered by a freaking demon of all things, and Jerry's worried about his beauty sleep. Gah. I looked Zach directly in the windows of his soul and took an aggressive step toward him. Jerry wouldn't have to worry about you being possessed or losing a wink of sleep if somebody had just worn his stupid necklace. Honestly, I wouldn't mind kicking your ass either. Zach scowled at me before averting his gaze and mumbling under his breath. I didn't care, he needed to be put in his place. Around 20 tense minutes later, we heard a pounding on the door. Hello, one of you nimwits want to let me in. I shot Zach a look. The cavalry has arrived. I walked to the door and latched the chain lock and let Jerry inside. He greeted me with a glare before marching directly up to my pea-brained coworker. The old man glowered menacingly, his eyes searching Zach's expression. Sorry? Zach offered, taking a step back. You better be. I was fast asleep until you two morons called me up here. Now what's this about a demon? I sighed, recounting the story to Jerry without omitting any of the minor details. He listened intently, staring daggers at Zach all the while. Alright, it's not that bad, Jerry said, pursing his lips. Not that bad? A freaking demonic entity took over my body and wants to eat my soul. What do you mean it's not that bad? Zach retorted, frowning at Jerry. I'm getting to that, sheesh. As I was saying, Jerry hissed, leering at Zach. Ammonius is the illegitimate son of Asmodeus, one of the 7 princes of hell and also known as the king of demons. Ammonius was the product of a scandalous affair with a mortal woman. Asmodeus was so appalled by the weakness of his son that he banished him from hell for all of eternity. Since that day, Ammonius has been trying to harvest souls and send them to the underworld in an attempt to restore himself in the eyes of his father. So what you're saying is, Zach got possessed by a half-demon, I interjected. Yes, Ammonius is so weak that he can barely control his host's bodily functions. From what I've observed over the years, he can really only speak and take a couple of baby steps if he's lucky. It's a miracle that you didn't encounter the demoness instead. If you had met her, you would have been doomed. Wait, there's a second demon? Zach shouted, his mouth agape. Yes, there is. Stick around long enough and you'll meet Elysia eventually. She was confined here by a spell nearly 200 years ago. She's a direct descendant of Lilith. A real feisty one she is. Okay, that's terrifying and all, but what about my situation? How do we get rid of Ammonius? I don't know about you two, but I would rather not have a loser half-demon taking residence inside of my body. Jerry sighed. Well, that's where things get tricky. This won't be a quick fix. I'll need to contact a Catholic priest who has been ordained as an exorcist. It may be a while before you're demon-free. Zach's frown deepened. That clearly wasn't the answer that he was hoping for. So what, I'm just stuck with this thing? What happens if Ammonius takes over while I'm driving? He could end me at a moment's notice. Jerry pondered for a moment. You should be fine. Contrary to popular belief, he needs you alive. Demons can only claim your soul if you A. make a deal with them, B. perform a certain ritual, or C. give them permission to take it. Unless you're an idiot, I assume options A and C are out of the question, and Ammonius isn't nearly strong enough to make you walk anywhere, let alone perform an entire sacrificial ceremony. I don't know, Jerry. Our options A and C off the table. If you haven't noticed, Zachary here isn't the brightest crayon in the box, I said, smirking. I was rewarded with a scowl. Jerry pursed his lips before standing to his feet. He placed a wrinkled hand on Zach's shoulder. Son, if you're really as stupid as your coworker seems to think you are, then you're doomed. Otherwise, just don't do anything too idiotic until I can pull some strings, okay? Whatever, thanks for nothing, old man, Zach whispered with a snarl. Screw you too then. Have a fun rest of your shift. Now if you'll excuse me, I have some sleep to catch up on. Jerry stormed out, slamming the door shut behind him. Well, that could have gone better, I said, folding my arms across my chest. Zach reluctantly met my gaze. Yeah, you're telling me. The remainder of the night went by without a hitch. We had already encountered all the weird stuff, so we were able to coast until dawn. I wish I could say that clocking out was like a breath of fresh air, that all my worries had faded away, but unsurprisingly they hadn't. I slept restlessly, knowing what kind of atrocities my next shift would have in store. I yawned as I trudged up to the guard shack. I produced my keychain from my pocket and fiddled with it until I found the correct key. Right when I was about to insert it into the lock, the door was fiercely yanked open. Oh, hey Zach, I didn't expect you to be here so early. Zach's eyes were wide and bloodshot. His hands were jittery and his hair was unkempt. If I hadn't known any better, I would have thought that a meth head had infiltrated my post. Yeah, I couldn't sleep, so I came in early. I just drank 2 entire pots of coffee. Never had coffee before. Do you know what that stuff does to you, huh? Caffeine, it's like a drug, you know. I feel like I could do anything, like I could fly if I wanted to. Great, so my dumbass coworker was damn near overdosing on caffeine. Awesome. Just how I wanted to start my shift. I pushed past Zach, punched in, and then turned back and thwacked him in the forehead. Ow, what was that for? You shouldn't have done that, Nate. No, you're not gonna do anything. You're gonna sit in this chair and stay still until I tell you to move. You're high as a kite on caffeine, unless we not forget. You're also possessed by a demon. Now sit down and shut up. Zach glared at me, puffing out his lower lip. You're not my dad. Yeah, I know, that man deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for keeping you out of trouble for so long. Anyway, let's take a look at the list for today. Zach passed me a sheet of paper with the word Tuesday imprinted on the top in bold letters. Well, what's it say? Zach asked, literally 2 seconds after handing me the page. I thumped him on the forehead again. Patience is a virtue. Start working on it. Zach mumbled something under his breath before gazing up at me thoughtlessly. His left leg bounced up and down like a jackrabbit. I sighed, praying that the rules wouldn't be too awful. Unfortunately, my prayers fell on deaf ears. I began to read aloud. Rule number 1. Early in your rounds, a skinless woman will appear to you. Flash your light at her and shout, I command thee, return to the shadows from whence you came. She will follow you for the remainder of the night from afar, but she will not harm you. Rule number 2. At 10 minutes past midnight, take the vial of goat blood from the drawer and spread it across your forehead. It will ward off the banshee. Rule number 3. A curse has been placed on all 5 members of the O'Connor family. They will rise from their graves and wander around the premises. They will not attack you unless provoked. Keep your distance just to be safe. Zach and I locked eyes, our jaws hanging open. What the heck? I muttered, scanning over the list again to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. Nate, I don't want to do this anymore. I think I need a career change. This is too much. I thought about it for a minute. The pay was incredible, yes, but did I really need this job? Would I be able to live comfortably without it? A big fat no flashed in my head like a siren. I normally would have thrown in the towel, but I had some hefty expenses and I couldn't afford to quit. I don't want to do this either, but I also don't have a choice. And if I was you, I'd be inclined to stick it out as well. After all, I doubt Jerry would be willing to help you out of your little predicament if you quit on your second day. Zach sighed. Yeah, you have a point. All right, let's get this over with. We each armed ourselves with a flashlight and headed out. I tucked that night's list in my pocket, just in case. The walk down the rows of headstones was tense. Each tiny movement was enough to make me jump. My heart exploded in my chest with every rustling leaf and whistle of the wind. The knowledge of what we were about to see put me on edge, and Zach wasn't faring any better. Due to the copious amounts of caffeine that he had consumed, he was even more jumpy than I was. "Hey, Zach," I said, keeping my eyes glued to my surroundings. He cautiously turned to face me. "What if she doesn't show up? Does that count as breaking the..." I froze when I saw the look of unabated terror etched across Zach's features. He was as pale as a ghost and his hands were trembling. The beam of his flashlight was trained on something behind me. Dread bubbled in my stomach. I didn't want to look. I didn't know if I could look, but I didn't have a choice. If I wanted to escape with my life, I needed to follow the rules. I whipped around, ripping off the band-aid. I cannot even begin to do justice to the abomination that stood before me. A red, pulsating mass leered back at me. Slimy, exposed veins thrummed in unison. That thing, it had no eyes, just empty, pitch-black holes where eyes should have been. The way that it was standing there felt wrong. Its head was cocked to the side like a curious dog, taking us in, studying us. I hyperventilated as I shined my flashlight into the monstrosity's face. It stumbled backward, raising its fleshy arms to shield it from the light. I hurriedly ripped out the rules and read from the page. "I command thee, return to these shadows from whence you came," I said in the loudest, most confident voice that I could muster. The writhing mass of muscle and sinew tipped its head downward at me in what I assumed was a glare, and it reluctantly slunk into the darkness, growing further and further away with each step. I watched it retreat until it stopped at the perimeter of the grounds. My heartbeat still hadn't completely settled, but I released a breath and I turned to Zach. All the blood suddenly drained from my face when I did. Zach was gone. Zach, this isn't funny. You can come out now," I said cautiously, proceeding to the spot where I had last seen him. I shone my flashlight down adjacent rows of gravestones. It was deathly quiet. The only sound that I could hear was my own ragged breathing. "Marco," I called out, in an attempt to calm my nerves. "Bolo." I instinctively leapt back. A deep, menacing voice from directly beside me had answered. I gulped. I recognized that twisted inflection. "Amodius?" I squeaked, peeking behind the nearest headstone. "Ding, ding, ding, we have a winner." Zach shot up from his hiding spot, now standing inches from my face. His eyes were again completely shrouded in black. "Come on, Amodius, we don't have time for this. Zach isn't giving you his soul anytime soon, so you might as well give it up." "Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that. You see, Zachary seems to be a very lonely man, and who better to befriend than the O'Connors? They really are nice people once you become acquainted with them." A disturbing grin inched across Zach's lips. He pointed to a silhouette lumbering along. My heart dropped into my stomach. He couldn't be serious. To my immense dismay, Zach lurched in the figure's direction, taking a huge, awkward step forward. I knew that I had to intervene. I leapt in front of him, halting the demon in his tracks. "Stop, I won't let you attack that thing." Amodius snarled at me. "Get out of my way." With one fell swoop, he smacked me square in the chest, sending me sprawling to the ground. "Harmless, huh? Can barely take a few baby steps, huh? Yeah, thanks for the warning, Jerry." I cursed, rising to my feet. The distance between Zach and the zombie-like figure was closing. I slowly shook my head. Zach wasn't going to like it, but I knew what I had to do. I marched up to Amodius, who, to Jerry's credit, was struggling to put one foot in front of the other. "Didn't I tell you to?" Smack. I punched him in the face as hard as I could. Zach's body crumpled in a heap on the ground. I grimaced as pain jolted through my knuckles like a lightning bolt. Mission accomplished. He was down for the count. And not a second too soon either, because when I turned around, I was met with a downright horrifying sight. What had once been a man stared at me with one glassy, pale blue eye. The other dangled uselessly from its socket, hanging on by a thread. Decaying flesh sloughed off his face, leaving areas of exposed sinew and tendons. Maggots writhed beneath his loose skin, intermittently falling to the ground. I was rooted to the spot, my breath hitched in my throat as I awaited the corpse's next move. After a tense moment of silence, the cadaver released a low moan before turning and ambling in the other direction. I gasped for air, placing a hand over my heart. That was a close one. I was going to have to keep my guard up. As the fear began to dissipate, I crossed my arms and glanced down at my unconscious coworker. What am I going to do with you, huh? Can't go 2 minutes without getting yourself into trouble. Zach released a small fart in response. Yeah, I feel the same way, I said, cracking a smile. Just to be sure that I wasn't forgetting anything, I pulled out the list of rules that I had tucked into my pocket. I frowned as I scanned over them again. I had forgotten about Rule 2. I hurriedly checked the time. We had 7 minutes. I vainly tried to pull Zach along, but years of Netflix marathons and gaming sessions didn't exactly work to bolster my strength. I began to panic. The guard shack wasn't too far away, but I definitely wasn't going to be able to get Zach there. That left me with one option. I dropped Zach's arm to the ground and I bolted. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me. The entire time I had the creeping sensation of being watched. I shined my flashlight to the perimeter of the graveyard and nearly leapt out of my skin. That thing, it was still there. It had been tagging along behind me the entire time, sticking to the shadows. I can't be certain, but I could have sworn that when my flashlight beam had landed on its face, I saw it grinning at me. That only motivated me to run faster. I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. There it was, the guard shack was in sight. Once I finally closed the distance, I flung myself through the door and began rummaging through the doors for the vial. I was such an idiot. I should have taken it with us from the get-go. I tossed aside various trinkets and papers until I found it, a glass bottle filled with a dark crimson liquid. I poured a splash of the goat's blood into my hand and unceremoniously swiped it across my forehead. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 3 minutes. With our saving grace in hand, I sprinted back to the spot where I had abandoned my coworker. Even if he was knocked out cold, I didn't want to know the implications of failing to ward off a banshee. I ran like my life depended on it. For all I knew, mine may not have been at risk, but Zach's definitely was. He might have been a moron, but he didn't deserve to die an excruciating death at the hands of some eldritch deity. I did, but not Zach. By the time my incapacitated coworker came into view, my legs were burning and my lungs screamed at me to stop. Fortunately, my adrenaline fueled me to continue onward. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Zach's immobile form came into view. My heart dropped into my toes. Someone was approaching me, and it wasn't any of the O'Connors. When I was about 50 feet away, I was able to clearly drink in her features. My worst fear was instantly confirmed. A woman with white, flowing hair was walking towards Zach's motionless body. She wore a white nightgown to match, and she had no shoes. At that distance, I couldn't tell if she was young or old, but I did begin to pick up on something that I hadn't noticed before. Crying. The woman sobbed openly, tears flowing down her face. The sound of her lamented cries made my blood turn to ice. She was going to beat me to Zach. I prayed to any god who would listen to help me, to help Zach, to get both of us out of our shitty situation. And something must have listened, because at that moment, Zach sat up. "Whoa, wait, who are you?" he said groggily, staring up at the woman shuffling over to him. She was so close, I had to think fast. "Hey Zach, over here," I shouted. He spun to face me. "Close your eyes." The moment that Zach's eyelids shut, I reared my arm back and chucked the vial directly at his head. Each second felt like a lifetime as the bottle whirled through the air. I was eventually met with the sound of shattering glass. I pumped my fist. The vial had exploded on Zach's head, the dark viscous liquid dripping down his face, and not a moment too soon. The woman had stopped crying. Her mouth was open, prepared to unleash an ungodly shriek, one that never came. Upon seeing Zach's bloody forehead, the woman closed her mouth, turned and walked away as if nothing had happened. "Oh, thank goodness. Zach, you're one lucky son of a gun, you know that," I said, trotting up to him. "Oh yeah, well, I don't feel like one. That hurt, man. How would you like to have a glass bottle smashed over your head?" he retorted, picking crimson shards from his hair. "If it saved my life, I don't think I would have too much to complain about. Let's get you cleaned up," I said, extending a hand. Now that's an idea that I can get behind. Soon enough, I found myself back at the guard shack, plucking tiny glass fragments from Zach's head. Not how I pictured my night going, but hey, we were both alive and that was all that really mattered. "Hey Nate," Zach said, shattering the silence. "What's up, man? Can I ask you something?" I pursed my lips. That's not a question that anybody wants to hear. "Well, it depends. What do you got for me?" "Okay, so I know the pay is phenomenal, but with all the bullshit that we've been through, why haven't you quit yet? I know it hasn't even been 2 days, but anybody else would have been running for the hills by this point. So why haven't you?" I sighed. "The pay. That's all there is to it." "Oh, come on, man. That can't be it. It's not worth the risk. There has to be something deeper." I paused, taking a deep breath. I knew this would probably come up eventually, but I was really hoping that it wouldn't. "All right, fine, but it's some heavy stuff. You have to promise me that what I tell you stays between us, okay?" I said, setting down the tweezers and maintaining fierce eye contact with him. "I promise." "All right, don't say that I didn't warn you." He nodded, indicating for me to begin. I glanced down, summoning the strength to do so. I exhaled sharply and spoke. "When I was 22, I was an alcoholic. I would start drinking at 7 on the dot every evening and go until 1 or 2 in the morning. Nasty hangovers every time that I would wake up. You see, after I graduated college, I couldn't find a decent job. While all my classmates got to kick off their brand new careers, I was stuck. I didn't get it. I wasn't bad in interviews by any means on the rare opportunities that I would land one, but still, nobody was willing to give me a chance. And so I drank to take away the sting of rejection, of complacency, of feeling like I was never going to amount to anything. And that's where I messed up. I couldn't see it then, but I had the world at my fingertips. I had so much to live for, and I threw it all away. I paused, glancing down at my feet. "Nate, I'm sorry. Look, you don't have to continue if you're not comfortable with it. I can tell that you've been through a lot." "No," I said, meeting his gaze. "I've started this and I need to finish it." Zach nodded, staring at the ground. "Okay, whenever you're ready." So, as you can imagine, I wasn't in the best headspace. Well, one night when I was absolutely plastered, I was really craving a pizza, and that led to the worst decision of my life. Instead of placing a delivery order, I drove to Pizza Hut. It was only 5 minutes down the road. Surely nothing awful would happen on that short of a drive, right? Wrong. I never should have started that car. I was so drunk that I could barely put my key in the ignition. That it should have been my indicator to stop, but I didn't. The last thing that I remember is pulling out onto the main road. After that, my memory is blank. All I know is that the next day I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed. Zach, I killed someone that night. Zach stared at me, his mouth agape. I could tell that he was trying to find the right words to say, but I didn't want to hear them. I wasn't worthy of anybody's sympathy, not after what I had done. It turns out the man I killed had a family, a wife and a 3-year-old daughter. They were present at the trial, and I couldn't bring myself to look that woman in the eyes. She was crying the entire time. And that's when the true weight of my actions really sank in. I had taken everything from her. That little girl has to grow up without a father because of me, because of what I did. I steadied myself, wiping the tears from my cheeks before I continued. The judge gave me 4 years. The family pushed for reckless homicide, but I got off easy. I only served 3 before they let me out on good behavior. It's been 2 years since then, and I haven't touched a drop of alcohol. This is the only job I can get that'll pay this well. I know that I don't deserve it. I don't deserve money, and I don't deserve happiness. I took somebody's life away. I should be rotting in a cell somewhere. But even so, I'm still trying to make it up to that family, to that little girl. I know that nothing will correct my mistakes, but that won't stop me from trying. I had a contact from inside track down where they live, and every month, I drop off any money that I save in a blank envelope. That's why I haven't quit. I need this job, not for me, but for them. It's only right after what I've done. When I finished, Zach didn't lift his head, his elbows resting on his knees. For a minute, I thought that he might have zoned out, but after a tense moment of silence, he reluctantly looked me in the eye. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. You did a messed up thing, but does that really mean you have to punish yourself for the rest of your life? That one selfish action will cause that man's family to suffer until the day they die. Because of that, the answer is yes. There's no changing my mind on this," I said, wiping a stray tear from my cheek. I deserve to work this twisted job and deal with whatever demented shit this place has to throw at me. I won't be quitting anytime soon. Zach didn't respond. He simply averted his gaze, his eyes returning to the ground once again. Before I knew it, Tuesday had come and gone without any more notable encounters. At sunrise, all of the creepy demonic entities returned to wherever they had come from, but they weren't the ones that I was worried about. With the weight of our previous exchange, I half expected Zach to skip out on me when it came time to return to work. But to my surprise, he didn't. "What's up, Nate?" Zach asked, taking a sip from a Red Bull. I mentally facepalmed myself. Great, more caffeine. Just what the doctor ordered. "Hey Zach, I'm kinda scared to ask, but how many of those have you had tonight?" He scoffed. "No need to worry, this is the only one that I've got. I'm not making the same mistake as last night." "I would hope not," I said as I clocked in. I was mid-stride, ready to find out what kind of horrors we were going to face that night when I felt a buzz in my pocket. My phone was ringing and Jerry's name was on the screen. "Hey Jerry, what you got for me?" I asked, turning it on speaker mode so Zach could hear. "I've got some good news. A buddy of mine was able to contact an exorcist in the area, and he's got an opening on Friday night. We just have to make it through this week." "Oh, thank God," Zach exclaimed, loud enough for Jerry to hear. Amodius has been a real pain in the butt. That rat took a picture of me crying like a baby and sent it to everybody in my contacts. "I know, I was wondering why you sent a photo of yourself bawling your eyes out and sucking your thumb. Thought it was some weird thing that you were into." Zach's face had turned beet red. He looked like he could keel over at any moment out of sheer embarrassment. "Anyway, just survive until Friday and this whole mess should be cleared up." "That's incredible, thank you so much, Jerry. Oh, and one more thing before you go." "What is it, kid? Make it quick. I gotta catch up on my beauty sleep." "Remember when you said that Amodius wouldn't put Zach's life in danger? Was that actually true? Because I'm pretty sure he tried to last night." "Yeah, I'm sure. Amodius might try to freak him out to entice him into making a deal, but he needs Zach alive. Without a living host, he's nothing more than a powerless watcher." I pondered his words. Maybe Jerry was right. Amodius did seem like the type of scummy half-demon to do that.
Alright, if that's all, I gotta go. Good luck.
I didn't even have a chance to reply before the line went dead. Well, that's promising, I said, redirecting my attention to Zach. And by the way, I saved that photo before you and sent the message. I'm not letting you live that down for as long as we're working together. Zach's lips instantly morphed into a frown. It warmed my heart just a little. Whatever, man, just read the rules already. I obliged, scooping up Wednesday's list. Rule number 1. Take the holy water from the desk. At some point in the evening, Reverend Clayment will try to convert you to Satanism by having you participate in a sacrificial offering. Splash holy water in his face and he'll leave you alone.